Welcome to the A to Z of licensed games, a series of vids about games that take something from something else. Excuse me, my throat's a little parched. That's hit the spot. Now wait a minute, what the hell's this? Well, I'll tell you. This is Pepsiman, a game for the PS1. It's funny, you know, having just done a whole video on advertising in games, I didn't really expect to be going back to the subject immediately. But as soon as I started playing this, I just knew it was the feature title. It's certainly unique enough, certainly weird enough, and guess what? It's certainly good enough too. But just what the hell is a Pepsiman? Because in all my years, I've never seen this fin advertising Pepsi. Well, it so happens that this is how they used to advertise Pepsi in Asia. Someone's desperate for Pepsi, so he runs in and provides it. Now I got to admit, the ads are pretty effective. Simple, catchy, instantly memorable. It's a perfect campaign. It'd have worked anywhere. But for whatever reason, Pepsiman only existed in Asia, and this game, despite being wholly in English, was only released over there. Which is kind of a shame, because it's easily one of the better ad games around. The game is as simple as it gets. You play the Pepsiman and you run down the street or sewer or wherever, you can go left or right, and you can jump or slide to avoid objects. The goal is to get the Pepsi to the people before the time runs out. You just gotta go from A to B. It's so straightforward your grandmother could pick it up in minutes. But while there's not a whole lot to talk about control or gameplay wise, it doesn't mean that the game's not tough. Avoiding everything on screen can be a right pain in the arse, especially when you get to the later stages. Everything's happening so fast, so much to take in. It's hard to relax and just get in the zone. At least not without a cool, refreshing beverage to wash the frustration down. But all the action is what makes the game, really. It's a great looking title for the PS1, everything happens at a good speed, and there's nothing about it that won't catch your eye. I mean geez, the fact that you're controlling a big shiny blue Pepsi selling T1000 is one thing, but just look at all these Pepsi loving freaks out there. It's like a carbonated utopia. And then you get this between the stages. I mean Christ, it's just too much. I need a drink.
Have a Pepsi. Next day.
You think I've laboured this enough yet? Anyway, Pepsiman is a very funny bit of Japanese weirdness, and it's a shame that it never came out in the West. Although from what I gather, the game did have a pretty good run in poorer places of the world where piracy's rife. Pepsiman was a massive hit in Arabia and Mexico, just to name two, even if it never came out there either, and the 80-foot giant reptilians who won Pepsi never so much as saw a shekel's worth of the profits. I mean geez, someone really dropped the ball on this one by not taking it worldwide. Hell, if all advertising was like Pepsiman, maybe I wouldn't be reading Naomi Klein books or whatever. But let's just make like Pepsiman and hurry along now. It's quite a good game if you just take it as a simple platformer on rails, but you'd have to be blind to not get sucked in by everything else, and that's what makes Pepsiman really quite good, and most definitely worth a play. Cheers! Now, for the first time in a while, we do have a good full load of honourable mentions to look at. First up, the game that could have easily featured today, Predator 2 for the Mega Drive. Hey, dig that funky soundtrack. Doesn't that just get you right in the mood for an extremely violent shooter? Soundtrack dissonance aside, Predator 2 is a very intense arena-style shooter where you have to rescue hostages and deal with hundreds of enemies. It's the sort of game that'll put hairs on your chest. I like it. It plays well and gets the adrenaline going. Plus it's another amusing example of a crap sequel getting a good game, while the classic original just got loads of shit. Oh, there's also a Predator 2 game for computers like the Specky, but it's cack, so I wouldn't bother. And here was another potential feature game, The Punisher. Made by Volition in the days before Saints Row, it's, well, a pretty accurate Punisher simulator. There isn't much bullshit or reasoning here, you simply administer justice with the help of some ice-cold steel. And you can then interrogate people as well, which is basically torturing an enemy until they cough up whatever info you need, and then simply killing them anyway in the most graphic manner possible. This, I guess, is the thing that makes The Punisher stand out. It's not a bad game at all, but for the most part it does kinda just play like a greatly inferior Max Payne. You can always stick with the arcade game here, which is your traditional slice of beat-em-up fun. Not the best beat-em-up, but you know something? Not bad either. And we're not even close to done. Let's go way back in time for some text-based adventure frolics. Here's an incredibly early game, The Prisoner, shown here for the Apple II. Now I'll be honest with you, I really don't know what I'm doing here, but I can still feel something of the atmospherics about this, and it is one of the earliest licensed games ever made, so it kinda needed to be shown. And this one here is Perry Mason, Case of the Mandarin Murder, a text adventure from 1986, or interactive fiction, as some might call it. Now this is regarded as one of the best IF games. It's based more around talking and interrogation than most, and the script's very well written. It's very crisp and very Perry Mason-esque. So if you like the genre, and if you like Perry Mason, then well, this is definitely worth a shot. And well, what about some Popeye games? Because we got them. This is the NES game, an arcade conversion, and one of the first games released for the console. Simply grab all the hearts while avoiding Bluto. You know, it's not exactly my favourite old school single screen game, but it's not bad. This, however, is the Popeye game that I remember, a platform game for the Spectrum where you pick up more hearts, basically. It's pretty slow and cumbersome, as you'd expect, but if there's any game on the Spectrum that could be described as a looker, well, this is it. Seriously, you seldom ever see sprites this big on the machine. Kind of a shame that the speed suffers so much as a result, but well, can't have it all. And with that, these honourable mentions are starting to get kinda long. So, apologies to Plan 9 from Outer Space and Phantom 2040, both of which were also very much worthy of note, but, well, there just wasn't time. We'll get to them another day. But now it's time to talk shit. Now you'll be happy to know that today's shitroom title has nothing to do with British television. Hey, the streak's been broken. Instead, we're going to talk about Predator. We'll have a game in a minute, but let's talk about Predator as a gaming concept, or the art of playing Predator. So what's that mean, eh? Well, it's a perfect mix of action and stealth. It happens when you get quite into your gaming and you start toying with your enemies rather than just dispatching them willy-nilly. You know, you follow them, you scare them a bit, and then you eviscerate them. That sort of thing. I mean, God knows where all this talk about violent video games comes from. Anywho, there are plenty of good examples, mostly modern. Crisis was one of the first major ones, I believe, with a big immersive jungle setting and lots of Predator-esque gear, big weapons, a futuristic suit, and even a freaking cloak. Rocksteady's Batman games have specific Predator-named sections where you take out groups of armoured enemies one by one. Now, the Caped Crusader may not kill, but a few batarans and takedowns will certainly leave thugs properly shitting themselves. And then there's Far Cry, which has always done this. But Far Cry 3, what with its jungle, its weapons, animals, and most certainly its flames, is possibly the definitive Predator game. Stalking's never quite been so much fun. The most recent game to do it for me personally was probably the Tomb Raider reboot. Now you'll notice that the jungle's featured in all but one of these games. It's quite important. Oh, and by the way, get used to seeing Lara Croft, because after this series is over with, well, she'll be taking centre stage. Now, of course, this is all very much inspired by the first Predator movie, a very important movie for video game designers, at least I reckon. You can see it all in the technology, and particularly in the way Predator treats the jungle, an open space that's oddly claustrophobic, where creatures beyond your worst nightmares are hidden in plain sight. Nowadays, films themselves are often inspired by video games, but if you watch Predator now, you may be surprised by how much that looks and feels like a modern video game. And yet we don't have that many good Predator games. I mean, the Predator seems at first like a perfect video game character. It can do so many different things, it's got tons of weapons that tear people apart, it's completely non-gender specific, and yet the Predator, well, isn't really. Aliens vs Predator, the first game featured on this list, came closest, but then most would agree that the Predator campaign was by far the weakest of the three, lacking either the uniqueness of the Alien campaign or the flat-out scare factor of the Marine campaign. The Predator is almost able to do too much in games. Playing as him is like turning on God mode automatically, with the same sense of hollow victory. And if you purposefully weakened the Predator, well, people would scream, wouldn't they? Hence, I think why there hasn't been all that many Predator games, and the ones there are have mostly disappointed. Which finally brings me on to the featured title, one of the few attempts, Predator Concrete Jungle, released for the PS2 and Xbox in 2005. A wholly different game to most of the ones just mentioned, this sticks the Predator into a 3D beat-em-up where rather than lurking in the shadows with cannons and discs at the ready, you're on the ground, armed to the teeth, and fighting hordes of enemies with your claws and spear. Now this is something that could work. The Predator has enough tools to be a good little beat-em-up protagonist. I mean, we saw it work in the 2D days. But, alas, this game misses the mark. The idea's not bad, but the execution is just hopeless. By the time you get to the story of an outcast predator going to Earth to redeem himself, and then you hear a gang leader talking in possibly the most ridiculous and racist Jamaican accent I've ever heard,
The enemy hides in the night, but the night...
well, you know you're in for a pile of shit. And that's just what you get. The graphics, for a start, are absolutely appalling. Looking at it, you wouldn't think of it as a PS2 game. This is PS1 standard, and quite a way into the system's life to boot. The animations, sound and whatnot, none of them are much better, and you're fighting the camera just as much as you're fighting the enemies. It feels so lousy to play. Enemies just stand there and shoot at you. You have to go to them and kick their ass. Absolutely no skill whatsoever involved. And keep in mind that this was 2005. The beat-em-up genre was starting to ride high. There were games like Ninja Gaiden Black, Devil May Cry 3, Shinobi, God Hand. This throwback compared to that is just embarrassing, made by guys who were at least 6 years behind the times. And the story's just terrible to boot. You know, I want to praise the idea because I think it'd make for a bloody good game in the right hands, but this, quite simply, is not it. It's not one ugly motherfucker, it's just plain ugly. Right, P's out the way. Next up is Q. Q is the abyss. You'll see something, I'm sure, but God knows what. I mean, look, this is the sort of material I have to work with in this letter. A question of bloody sport. I mean, do you want to watch a 15-minute biography of David Coleman? I don't, and I sure as shit don't want to make it either. But hey, I might have no choice. But damn it, let's try not to be defeatist. I'll come up with something good, just you watch. Until then, thanks for watching, and wherever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time.